From the intersection of 218 and 80, with rivers like our own that seek for seas they never find. I'm Aaron McNally, and this is Curiosophy Now.
To
Oh,
be
that's
able
wonderful.
to work together effectively and get the best out of one another and actually feel good in the process and positing
So is that a nonprofit?
No, it's not. It's a
No,
corporate
it's
venture.
not.
It's a
It's a
corporate
corporate
venture
venture.
and it's a coalition
But
of
it's with a social justice
yes. Yeah, I
mission.
mean, yeah, absolutely. And more just, I mean, social justice is an interesting term
Well,
because
yeah. It's a problematic term, as all
so
terms are. Yeah.
the way that I see it in very simple terms is the way that things are is not working for anybody in practice.
Right.
Or at
Right.
the very least, it's not optimal. It could definitely be better. And I
Yeah.
think that most people would probably agree on that.
Mhm.
And if you take a step back, well, what would you want to be better or different? You come up with some things, you start writing them down, you start being like, oh, well, is that or could that be possible? And you go from there. And equilibration is about really bridging the gap between maybe the move towards a more traditional way of being, so like the rise of the far right and trad wife, trad life type orientations with very progressive
Mm.
movements towards women taking up space in the workplace, being in boardrooms, leading companies, but also in practice needing support and
Yeah.
often shouldering a lot of invisible labor, both
Mhm.
in the workplace and at home, and not being compensated for it, and not being honored for it, and suffering for it, and their relationships with everybody around them suffering for it. And when women suffer, everybody around them suffers.
That's right. That's right.
So it's actually in everybody's interest if women are
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah. 100. 100. When I think that's the aspiration of the term social justice is what you're describing. It's like beings able to participate in culture and discourse in a healthy way
Yeah.
with proper boundaries and access so that we can, whatever enterprises we engage in can be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And the crucial thing about equilibration, but also I feel that what's needed in general right now is men like stepping up and
Right.
taking responsibility and actually
Hmm.
taking care of women,
Yes.
which is an interesting and somewhat controversial topic for some. And that's not to negate that men have feelings and those feelings aren't valid and that there aren't major issues with the status quo. It's actually to give men a role and to allow them to thrive
Hmm.
in a way that often is actually feels most natural to them.
Right. The old stereotype is that men like to have a job to do and they
Yes, and
can
that's
prove
actually
to themselves
true.
that they've done their job.
It's
Yeah.
literally true. And
Yeah.
and this is the amazing thing. And this is again, I touch upon this in my work in many different ways, like just in my personal work as well. Like when men feel like they are doing the right thing, when men feel like they can do the right thing, they feel really good,
Hmm.
independent of what that thing is.
Hmm.
And what so many women miss, and I think what's got so misconstrued and subverted is this idea that that paradigm is contingent on the presence of romantic affection or intimate connection, when that's
Right.
actually not true. And
It's
the idea of
100% not true. In
and
fact, that romantic stereotype is utter bullshit. John Vervaeke
exactly,
goes on about this.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and the idea of that is actually often quite upsetting for men because
Yeah.
men are like, no, I want to be honorable. No, I actually care about you
Yeah.
as you. And then women rejecting that feels like an affront. and then it brings people apart and means that people can't trust one another. Men
Yes.
can't give in the way they want to. Women can't receive in the way they want to. Yes, I'm being gendered here. Like, if this doesn't apply to people listening or anyone, that's fine. But,
Right. Yeah.
like,
So just a disclaimer, we're talking in thumbnails for the sake of ease of conversation. There's going to
yes.
be gray areas, there are going to be margins, but we're
Yeah.
talking about general
Yeah.
central.
These
Yeah,
are generalizations. Take what applies for you, discard anything that doesn't. If it doesn't feel relevant, just don't listen to it. And when I say don't listen to it, I mean don't give it more attention than it needs to, because you know
absolutely.
best
Yeah.
for yourself.
Absolument. So this ties into what you're doing um, as a personal venture with your alternative executive coaching. You
Yeah,
say you
I found
say
that quite a funny tagline, so I just kept it. Yes.
it's a beautiful tagline, but it's funny to you though. I didn't laugh at it. I was actually quite enchanted by it. But what's funny about it for you?
Ugh.
It's just corporate ease, making fun of the way that we term things.
It's the yeah, it's the I feel good about it. I like it. I
Hmm.
recognize that what I do is operates at the intersection of different worlds, and that's
Hmm.
very intentional and
Yeah.
is quite subversive in nature, no matter like what it actually looks like in practice,
Hmm.
because it is very deep and very much about what's going on right here, not
Yeah.
in theory, like let's be here. And I train to be an executive coach. I am a qualified executive coach. I
Oh.
don't know of any other executive coaches who do things the way I do or focus on what I focus on, which, you know, in two words is really sex and shame, but specifically for men or around men. And I can see people's eyebrows uh, potentially being raised around that. And I don't know. I
We'll
just
get into that later about the eyebrow raising, but I've got some questions about that. But don't
go
worry
for
about that. Tell me more.
about what would you like to know more about?
So sex and shame, those are the things that you're
Yeah,
focusing on. Yeah,
yeah,
and particularly with men.
yes.
I interrupted your train of thought. I'm so sorry. I'm a
No, it's
horrible interviewer. In that I really like conversing more than interviewing, to be honest. Um, well, I guess maybe I'll just not put that to the later stage. I think maybe I'll just address it now. So there's this fear people have. You say, "Oh, your eyebrows are raised. We're talking about men," and there's this sort of idea like, let's not put the onus on women here. Let's not blame the victim. Let's not feel like let's not feel like empathy for the oppressor, something like that. But the reality is that we're trying to change an entire cultural environment that is currently primarily inhabited by white cis men, right? So, like it or not, we got to deal with these dudes, right?
Yeah.
And for the listener, she was giving me thumbs up while I was saying that.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if you've heard of the drama triangle.
I
Um,
have not.
okay, well, let me make sure that I get the name of the guy right. Drama triangle. Kaufman, sorry. It's a social model of human interaction proposed by Stephen B. Karpman, which maps a type of destructive interaction that can occur among people in conflict. And it uh, is a model of dysfunctional social interactions and blah, 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 illustrates the power game that involves three roles: victim, rescuer, and persecutor, each
Mm,
role representing a common and ineffective response to conflict. So the journey around the triangle can be done with self or another, such as a spouse, child, co-worker, and so on. Most of us are neurologically programmed to play these three roles. And we
Mm-hmm.
consciously, I'm going to slow down because I can feel myself getting there. And we consciously or unconsciously choose one role given the particular context.
Mm-hmm.
The three roles explained. In the drama triangle, each player in the particular mind game begins by assuming one of the three typical roles. Persecutor, it's all your fault. Victim, poor me. Rescuer, let me help you. Victims often feel victimized, trapped, helpless, and hopeless. They think they are at the mercy of life. They are unwilling to take responsibility for their undesirable circumstances and don't think they have the power to change their lives. Victims assume themselves as powerless or incompetent and blame on persecutors, who can be other people or a particular situation. They always seek for rescuers to solve the problem for them. If the victims continue to stay in the dejected stance, it will prevent them from making decisions, solving problems, changing the current state, or sensing any satisfaction or achievement. Rescuer, let me help you. Rescuers constantly intervene on behalf of the victims and try to save the victims from perceived harm. They feel guilty of standing by and watching people drown. Rescuers may have all the good intentions and strive to help other people as they see necessary. They fail to realize that by offering short-term fixes to victims, they keep victims dependent and neglect their own needs. This
That's
is why
huge.
rescuers often find themselves pressurized, tired, and may not have time to finish their own tasks, as they are busy firefighting for the victims as they arise.
That's the whole social service industry in the United States right there in a nutshell.
Persecutor, it's all your fault. Persecutors are like critical parents who are strict and firm and set boundaries. They tend to think that they must win at any cost. Persecutors blame the victims and criticize the behavior of rescuers without providing appropriate guidance, assistance, or a solution to the problem. They are critical and good at finding fault and control with order and rigidity. They keep the victims oppressed and can sometimes be a bully. There, I want to recognize I fluffed there and I feel grumpy about it, and that's okay. But yeah. Um, so that was a brief blurb from a website that I pulled up. But yeah, in simple terms, back to white men, persecutor, oppressor, the narrative around that. I've long been aware of the massive gap and hypocrisy that's, in my opinion, blindingly obvious that people ignore because there isn't space for it. There isn't space for it in their narrative or way of being. But ultimately, the way that things are is part of a system, and systems don't change without involving all parts. And one of the most powerful things that I've found in my own personal journey has been learning to see people,
Mm-hmm.
not as oppressors, not as victims, not even as rescuers, but as humans with stories and experience the richness that comes when you're able to meet one another in that way. And the philosophy of my work, in a very deep sense, is that if everybody believed and trusted that they were safe held, loved, and worthy of love,
Hmm.
i.e., lovable in some way, in all ways, the world would transform before our eyes
Hmm. Yeah,
effortlessly.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it just stands to reason from the vantage of evolutionary psychology that, we are, as organisms, as minded mammals, we evolved ways to avoid threat and seek safety. And so that's how our whole internal nervous system is programmed. And if we feel like we're not perceiving safety, that puts us on alert and we act aggressively. That's kind of the default response, right? And I think so. It's very not curious isn't the word. It's very beautiful what you're doing with respect to how you're the way I was introduced to you was through Twitter, and the thing that caught my eye was you had tweeted something and you had asked an earnest question, and you said, "Men, uh, have you ever felt?" I can't remember the specific question. You've asked a lot of wonderful questions that have caused me to go through some luscious psychological contemplation. And I was, oh, somebody's asking me like how I feel, how I think. And what I've been working on with my therapist this whole past year has been just trying to identify my fucking emotions, right? Because I'm so out of fucking touch with my emotions. Now, and that's played out in such horrendous ways in my intimate relationships and even in my professional relationships. Every relationship, my relationship with parents, everything, And so becoming, because I'd done the mindfulness thing and I did my fair share of spiritual bypassing, and it's good. I mean, it's good to know those skills. They're valid skills, but they have to be done in the context of discourse where you're actually being present. And you talk about embodiment.
Yes.
Talk
Yes.
about that. Talk about embodiment.
No.
Okay,
Let's not talk about it. I don't want to
perfect.
fucking talk about embodiment.
Well, you shouldn't, because it's obscene for a
You
man
can't
to
talk
make a
about embodiment.
demand like that.
That's like the whole fucking point. You can't talk about it. We need to fucking stop talking about
That's
this shit.
that's great, because
I am.
you mentioned shadow work, and you kind of allude to Jung a little bit, and that's exactly what you're talking about. It's like there's this whole field of sensitivity and sensibility that is not accessible to the propositional linguistic mind, but it's very important. It tells us a lot. It gives us a lot of information. We have to learn how to experience it and understand it, and commune with it. And
Yeah. And it's not just that it's important, it's that it's always there and
mhm,
it's always influencing us.
mhm, it's
And yet
vital.
we're taught to shut it down and shut
Yeah,
ourselves down. And
yeah,
then we
yeah.
wonder why we feel so shit. Well, of course we feel shit
Yeah.
because we are shutting ourselves and our emotions down. And if you are shutting your emotions down, then how the hell do you expect to feel good? And now
It's just,
you are seeing me animated.
yeah, yeah. It's impossible. It's completely impossible. To try to. It's like asking a computer to. It's like asking a computer to. Uh, just anything, like anything other than to pull up my website. Ask a computer to grow a leaf, and the computer's like, that's not what I do. That's the same thing with our autoimmune system, or limbic system. It's not designed to pretend to be a an effete intellectual in the ivory tower with the objectivity. That's not what it's fucking made for. It's made to interact with objects in space, to smell and to hear and to, yeah.
Yeah. And we are not supposed to pretend to be or try to be like machines. That's not an optimal human life, in my
Hmm.
opinion. And we can do it to some extent, as many people have proven very effectively. And coincidentally, perhaps, it's also quite challenging to quantify the cost, the intangible cost of operating in that way, because very often, day to day, the cost is intangible and baked into what it requires and entails to be mechanistic in our ways of being. So if you are shut down enough, if you are disconnected enough, if you are disembodied enough, you will not notice that anything is wrong most of the time. And when you do notice, if you do notice, you will probably find very convenient, effective, powerful, insert adjective ways of managing that
Yeah.
or excusing it or blaming it on something else.
John Vervaeke, the cognitive scientist, I'm kind of a fanboy. He's always talking about how the very uh, neuropsychological machinery that we have that allows us to adapt to our environment, to become such skillful, meta, self-aware creatures, that same machinery allows us to bullshit ourselves constantly.
Fuck yes. Fuck yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Blah. When
I'm
was
going
the
to
last
use
time you
this.
bullshitted yourself?
The last time I bullshitted myself,
Yeah.
you mean like this morning or something like that? Like
Yeah.
probably, like I'm trying to think like, oh yeah, I don't need to eat breakfast because what, I mean, like I'm not hungry and, I'm trying to lose weight anyway, that's perfect example. Yeah. No, that doesn't work. You need to eat breakfast. It's the way that you create a sound, physical, speaking of embodiment, a physical, sort of a platform by which you can interact with the cosmos. You can't do that without nutriment, without calories. But
How much do you value routine in your life?
how much do I value routine?
Mm-hmm.
I value routine very highly. I don't necessarily act in accordance with my value.
Mm-hmm.
I act much more chaotically than, uh, like I know if it would be easier if I would just, pray or meditate in the morning and then, make sure I go to bed by before 11 and, eat at certain times. And I know that would make things easier.
What would it make
And
easier?
then what's that?
What would it make easier?
It would be an act of self parenting that would show a degree of concern for myself that would be such that I would feel that safe, secure vibe you were talking about earlier.
How safe is it to feel safe, though?
How safe is it to feel safe? At some point, that gets a little bit abstract. I think.
Okay.
I think the idea is to feel as though my forward thinking, quote unquote, adult self is in consort with my quote unquote young self, so that both selves feel as though their needs and desires are at the very least being acknowledged, if not provided for. And that sensibility just gives the foundation for the possibility of a grounded support system. It's not. I like that you point out that you need to remember the fact that we can't we can't bank on an assumption about the nature of reality, because things change constantly. So, I understand. It's not so much that here's the form, here's the safety, this is the thing. Now I know what is what. It's not that. It's not a brittle, rigid system. It's whatever comes our way, we're going to figure out how to deal kind of vibe, something like that.
Can you think of a time where you have stuck to your values in that way, or what you say you value in relation to
Hmm. Yeah,
doing your
my
prayers?
entire life. I mean, I always offer myself the right amount of solitude to have the opportunity to write poetry, for example, because it's very important to me. I need to do that. That's a
Mm-hmm.
survival thing for me. And so
Mm-hmm.
I always have that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also, if I'm not interacting enough, if that solitude starts to become isolation, I feel that I get depressed, like anybody gets depressed. And then I say, I need to interact. So it's not so much, can I pinpoint a day and a time, the minute? No, I can't. But I can say I do have a sensibility where I'm aware of that.
I don't think I phrased my question clearly. Let me try that again.
Okay.
Um, I was really curious when you shared earlier about the value of routine and
Hmm.
how it's one of your core values, but that you don't
Hmm.
necessarily always do the things you think you should do
Hmm.
in practice. The things you know would be good for you. You mentioned eating breakfast,
Hmm.
meditating, doing prayers in the morning,
Hmm.
etc. And then I said, and then when we discussed it, you mentioned self-parenting and creating a safe space. And I said,
Hmm.
how safe does it feel to feel or be safe? And what I'm curious about is whether we can go back to a place and time where you have done those things. What did it feel like? What came up for you
Yeah, yeah,
emotionally?
yeah, yeah. I got you. I got you. Yeah. My therapist did some hypnosis with me, and I had this lovely experience where I descended these stairs, and I was like laying in a sort of depressed area in the grass. It was very profound because I worked through all of these, and you're going to love this because it's right in line with what you do. I worked through like levels of conceptualization of femininity with respect to that, because I had some. My mother was very quick to anger, and I had some. There was some physical abuse when I was a very young child, so I have a attachment thing, and uh, it was like I was. If I wanted to sleep, I could sleep. If I was dead, that'd be fine. But I was alive and I could perceive everything. I could smell the aromas of the grass and the soil and everything. And then there was like right next to me was a woman who I'd been dating at that time.
Mhm.
And then there was women who I've dated in the past. And then it's funny. I actually didn't actually see my mother specifically, but then I have a Catholic background, so ultimately it went toward the Divine Mother, the Madonna,
Mm.
the Mother of Christ, and then I've also done some Vajrayana stuff and worship green Tara and different shades of Tara, and so then it kind of just became like white light, and just so that's an extreme example. A more colloquial example would be honestly this morning. I mean, I woke up this morning and put both feet on the floor and said thank you as I do, and said my little. I do a Baha'i prayer, where I bear witness to the miracle of my creation. And so just this morning, I did that, the very thing you're describing, feeling safe and feeling ordered. And, you know,
Are you able to tap into that now? A safe space. I'm just taking a
so,
moment to breathe
yeah.
and be here with me. And yes, we're recording, but if we need to, we can take this out. And
Mm-hmm.
for now, this is just us sharing a moment together. Dropping into your body, the in breath, and then breathing more deeply out and making the out breath longer than the in breath, and just taking some moments to land. And you're in your safe place. You're
I've
in.
noticed you put on your site some examples of discourse which has been shared with you from some of the men with whom you've worked.
Mm-hmm.
And the state they find themselves gaining access to is something they are quite apparently not accustomed to. It's not the norm for them, to say the least. And they
Yes.
sort of gush with adoration for you, or at least who they think you are. They gush with adoration for the opportunity to be
Yes.
in
Yes.
this evocative
Yes.
realm where one
Yes.
can truly be.
Yes.
I said to my therapist one day, he had me do something, and it was a mindfulness exercise where it was sort of like perceiving little things in the space sounds, and working through the senses and just becoming embodied. Uh, not to talk about embodiment, but um,
Much more effective.
to the listener, she's making all kinds of
Like
grotesque
weird,
gestures.
grotesque. I am the queen of grotesque faces. Just FYI, working with me is mostly an opportunity to let
Yeah,
yourself look as stupid as
yeah,
possible
yeah, yeah.
without
Because
fear.
that breaks the
Like
shit, right?
seriously, it
Yeah,
breaks the shame, and it
yeah,
allowing
yeah,
yourself
yeah,
to be witnessed and allowing
yeah.
yourself to make it funny and playful. Gold dust.
Bam, done. Yeah,
Bam! Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And he asked me how I was feeling, and I said I felt energy, like kind of in my lower chakra. You know what I
Mhm,
mean? Like I was like, it's the same kind of energy that I feel with like sexual attraction.
mhm,
But I was like, it wasn't. I said I'm not having any like explicit erotic attraction to you, but I'm feeling that same energy activated.
mhm.
And I think that that's a tell, right? That's kind of revealing something that's not being tapped into in daily life. And when it comes out, men tend to, and there are a number of causes for this. You talk a little bit about sex and porn addiction
Mm-hmm.
on your site. Part of it is just, yeah, it's just the old good old fashioned objectification of women. This sort of acculturation towards thinking of those energies in personal interactions as a sex thing, and men just kind of default to that a lot of times.
Yeah, because they've been taught to.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
haven't been taught any different. And so a big part of my work is literally teaching men
yeah.
how to treat women and experience women like multifaceted human beings by
Uh-huh.
spending
Yeah,
time with one.
right.
Hello!
Sure, of course, of
Hi, it's
course.
me!
Yeah. Well, and not because sometimes, like, I would argue that I probably spend more time with women than I do with men, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm spending time with women on a full spectrum of,
It's the full spectrum place.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
so
yeah,
it's the fact that the focus of my
without
work is
lapsing
being
into
able to
roles
meet
and
you.
meet you.
So
Yeah.
you don't have to play a certain role.
Hmm.
And in fact, you are encouraged to speak about what's real and not hold back in any context, which can be pretty fucking scary for a lot of
Yeah,
people to hear.
yeah,
Like, what
yeah,
the hell does that mean? Like, I'm scared of myself. I'm scared of you. I don't This feels really destabilizing. This feels wrong in some cool way. Okay,
yeah,
let's talk about that. What's
yeah.
going on there? And with that, there's so much space for exploration and connection and richness and expansive experiences of intimacy beyond convention and beyond traditional structures of romance, as an
Hmm.
example.
Absolutely. And space is exactly the precise word. It's that we're so often constricted.
Yeah, yeah,
To open is to accept the fact that, you
yeah,
know,
yeah. And I actually think that in many ways men are far more constricted than women as it relates to their social roles. There is
okay,
less space,
because status is a huge factor in how they,
and men are dangerous, or men are
right.
more likely to be seen to be dangerous, or
Sure.
actually actively inadvertently cause harm. And I just mean that
Right.
in factual terms. I'm a petite woman. It's harder for me to physically hurt somebody than it
Yeah, you're just talking
is.
about basic
I'm
torque
talking about
and
basic stuff
force
here.
and yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
can walk down the street and I don't think that anybody I don't think that most people ordinarily would look at me and think she's intimidating or scary looking,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like I don't want
Probably
to
not.
walk
Yeah.
past her on a dark night. I
Yeah.
very much doubt that that has happened. And that protects me in many ways. And that also gives me more space to inhabit different personas, to
Hmm.
wear different things, to be more playful, to be more whatever, in a way that many men, it's not just men, but many men can't or struggle with and feel inhibited as a result. And these same men often are the ones who don't know how to flirt, are afraid of talking to women, are afraid of being seen as creepy, and then, therefore, implicitly end up giving off creepy vibes because they don't know how to orientate themselves. And their animal body is communicating fear, and that is fundamentally unsexy and unsafe to be around.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
don't want to be around
look.
somebody who is bigger than you, who seems fearful. That is just not
Yeah.
a nervous system wise, doesn't feel good.
Yeah. And look, I live in fucking United States. some of these fuckers can get automated weapons and shit. You know what I mean? Like that guy, it was only a decade ago, that guy went and shot a bunch of women. He just shot every blonde woman he saw. You know what I mean? Because he had this whole complex of fear and resentment and,
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
it turned into just vicious,
Yeah.
malicious,
Yeah.
toxic destruction. It was
Yeah.
just,
So we're so aware of what happens when stuff goes wrong, but that same energy can be channeled so powerfully into making things go right.
and all you have to do is go to a bar on a Saturday night 2 blocks from my house. There are a fucking half dozen of them. You can see guys dealing with that exact same energy, you know, and it used to, I mean, it's getting better, but it's still not fixed by any means. I mean, rape culture is real,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, women are seriously harmed every fucking weekend in Iowa City. I mean, it happens like over and over and over and over. And our judicial system doesn't know how to fucking deal with it, and it's
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to. I
No, I
hope that
agree with you. And I
I know
agree
my
with you.
energy is so intense. I hope I didn't
No, no,
seem
no. I
aggressive
agree
or
with you. I absolutely agree with you. And this is where I think the other prong comes in, which is women being able to be powerful, women standing in their power, women being able to advocate for themselves, women being able to be a fuck no, and that being impenetrable. And I mean that in every sense. So I had an experience this summer that really tested me in that regard and
oh,
was super, super, super interesting. So I was at a Tantra training uh, course retreat in Italy. And there was a guy there. We were doing these exercises, um, sitting in a room as a group, and we were all in various stages of undress. And he I've got it all written down. I can share the piece of writing later. But he said, like, I want to fuck you. And this is a guy who is an established tantra teacher, probably 20 or 30 years older than me. And I was his partner for this exercise. We were going to be together for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or something like that. Again, the details are not important here. And that's actually also what I want to stress. Like, when it comes to trauma, when it comes to recounting these stories, often you just saw that with me right now. I was like, I don't know what happened.
yeah,
Nah. And yeah, I'm also like, I'm pretty fucking powerful with this, and I still go into that state. So
yeah.
that's just also like,
Listeners,
I wanted to be on record that like this stuff is real and quite deep
yeah, yeah.
and meaningful. But anyway, so
I just wanted to say to the listeners, I did an interview with Tony Ortega, who's a journalist who covers Scientology, and there was a rape trial for a guy who was a Scientologist, and what you're just talking about just now was used by the defense attorney to get the guy to get a mistrial, because stories get like, this is not, you know the way that people account from memory traumatic experiences is not the same thing as typing in numbers in an Excel spreadsheet. It's like,
and it
and
never will
it's
be.
used against women all the time to
Yes.
not
And it's
get
used to
justice.
discredit
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah,
and so
yeah,
that's the key thing. What we're dealing with, not just with or from women, and in general as a collective, what we're dealing with are massive trauma responses. But it just so
yes.
happens that women,
Often intergenerational, by the way.
intergenerational,
Yep,
exactly.
yep.
But it just so happens that women are taught to put their attention in and freeze or fawn, and
Right.
men are generally taught to put their attention out and
Mhm.
fight
Yep.
when it gets to crunch time.
Yeah.
And these are generalizations. They
Of
don't
course. Yeah.
apply in all contexts.
Right.
But that
Nevertheless, we see that
we see this.
80% of the wealth is
Yes.
owned by white cis hetero males. You know, I mean, like we see
Yes.
how it plays
Yes.
out.
We see how
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
things play out, and we see how they continue to be perpetuated, and we see how it perpetuates itself. And we see how one type of power or presence is prized or valued over another,
Mm-hmm.
and what a cost this occurs at to the collective, to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like, men are starving for love, affection, and intimacy. Most men who are struggling with sex and porn addiction that I've personally met, worked with, spoken to, are deeply, deeply, deeply hungry for that underneath and looking for it in those ways because it's what they know and it's the closest they can come and it's the most socially acceptable way of accessing that kind of experience. If you weren't shown love just for being you, if you weren't hugged, if you weren't shown affection, and you've been taught to go out into the world and conquer, and that your value is about your status or about what you achieve or about who you have on your arm or about how things seem rather than how they are, then you're going to keep running and you're going to keep chasing. And that's not because something is wrong with you. That's because that's how you've been set up to succeed in this paradigm.
Right.
So back to my story. Back to my story. He made a comment about being able to fuck me closer to God or something like that. I mean, this was a tantra retreat. Like, there's a... I don't know what your listeners are like.
Is going to be around.
You know, it's this, like... Anyway, I said no. And I said no, and I felt in my body, like, this, like, feeling of, like, constriction, like, am I, like, what's going to happen next? Like, is it safe to say no? Is he going to try and do something? Is he going to try and push past my no? And I'd really experienced this person as being quite predatory. That's the part that I haven't said yet. I'd experienced this person as being like a slimy, conniving, big taker energy. I really didn't like him. So to be sat on this mat with him, like, semi-naked, was not my idea of fun. And having him tell me that he wanted to fuck me when we were supposed to be, like, exploring connection did not, like, was like, bleh, bleh.
Yeah.
But it was actually a really amazing experience. And I'm going to tell you why, because this is really, really important. And this really actually transformed my way of being in the world and the way that I viewed concepts like predator and prey. Because I said no. And then he asked me what I would like instead. And I said I would like a massage of my shoulders. And he gave me a massage of my shoulders. And that was that.
That was quite...
that was the end of the story.
But you invited touch in that moment. That's very interesting.
I did. Well, I did this whole thing to push myself. So I wanted...
So you deliberately chose to do something that would still be uncomfortable, but not that uncomfortable.
Yes, no. I wanted to give myself... Look, this guy is a very experienced tantra teacher. He's good at touching people. Like, it's... this is an experienced
Right.
misuse.
Was
I
there
wanted to be able
desire?
to use this experience for my pleasure. And I wanted to
For,
understand what
right,
that felt like. And that was new to
perfect.
me. And that was not
Yeah.
something that I'd ever been taught to do, taught how to do, or taught would be possible for me within the context of male female dynamics, or then saying
Right.
no, like renegotiate it.
Yes. It's kind of an all or nothing. Either
An
I'm
all
into
or
it or
nothing.
I'm not.
And then it's like
And I'm going to figure
yeah,
out a
exactly.
way to
And
find a yeah.
yeah,
Wow. So I'm really curious about this. So do you think that you had an a desire, an underlying desire that was not able to express itself because the fear was oppressing it?
no.
No, there was no desire at all. Okay. Well, but so
It's a
but
great
even to
it's a
have your
good question.
massage or something. Yeah.
It's totally a good question. No. And I've been really wanting to open myself up to expansive experiences of intimacy in my own right and to be able to feel safe with men and safe to receive. And I know that obviously to be able to be an effective practitioner and facilitator in my work, I need to do my own work first around this. And so I've been very committed to that in parallel. And I think there's tremendous space and power in non-sexual intimacy and
Yes.
exploring like healing touch. And I also just wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to give myself the opportunity to respond to a situation that could have put me in a really shut down state and really made me go, blah, I can't deal with this. I want to go and sit in the corner for the rest of the training and like not talk to anybody. I feel so isolated. I feel so ashamed. I feel so like overwhelmed. Or I could lean into it. And, you know, for what it's worth, I was also very clear about my boundaries with him. I said I didn't want to touch him. So I didn't.
Good for you. That's amazing.
Like,
That's so wonderful.
that's not unreasonable. It's
No, it's
just
no.
we're often taught that it's unreasonable to actually be honest about what we desire. And as women, to be unreasonable, full stop. To like be greedy or be whatever. When actually, A, that's super attractive to a lot of men and a lot of people, full stop.
That's true. Yeah.
But B, it's where like pleasure is. Reciprocity in like
Yeah.
the kind of very transactional sense is the opposite of erotic.
That's right. Yeah.
It's
It's
just
math,
you don't
not
want to
body. Yeah.
do like if you have a partner, you don't want to get into a pattern of saying, oh, you know, if you give me a blowjob, I'll do X.
Yeah.
That
You you can make that into a kink if you want to.
You
I mean,
can. You can. But
couples
my
make
point is,
games
like,
out of it. But
in and of itself,
yeah.
the idea that
Quid pro quo.
quid pro quo ways of being are optimal suggests that there is no inherent pleasure in
Yeah.
giving, which is wrong. And
Because
also that there's no inherent pleasure for the receiver.
the whole
In
idea of pleasure is it's founded on the presupposition that I conceive of myself as an ego being. I'm a being. I'm a being who has a subjective experience in the cosmos. And how I interact with that is positive or negative vis-a-vis how I conceptualize it. So to say to so what you're saying, you know, it's not selfishness, it's self-awareness, really, to say I have desire. I do not desire that. I desire this.
yeah,
And that's necessary. It's very necessary. And women are sort of
if
taught in
you
so many unspoken ways in the culture that's always some kind of compromise or something. And I think it's like maybe a pre-birth control thing where like it had to do with how I don't know how clans and tribes worked with fidelity and child rearing or something, but that's not, we're living in a completely different world now. We can recognize our desires. We don't have to base everything on fear.
And also, if someone is doing something for you because they feel like they should, if it's coming out of a place of obligation,
That's a
that
bad
does
tell.
not feel good to receive. There
It's
is an
it
energetic.
doesn't feel good to receive, and that person might express that in resentment later.
Yes, exactly. There's an unspoken contract there that no one's really talking about, and no one really, again, quantifies the cost of, that often comes
Yeah.
out later with, I've done so much for you, you don't
Yes.
appreciate me. And I don't just mean in sexual context here, I mean in
No, you just,
general,
in
when we
general,
overgive.
exactly. I've done it myself.
Yeah,
This has happened to me multiple times in relationships with women. I've felt like I'm constantly going against my nature to try to be the good guy, the right guy, and then later I just suddenly fucking resent them. And they're like, where did this come from? It's a, it's a legitimate question. Where the fuck did it come from? Well, it came from the fact that I wasn't properly interacting with my own
yeah,
internal set of emotions, desires, etc.
yeah. You've got to be true to yourself first, even especially when it's painful, to really be able to connect with another in the way that you so desperately want.
This work that you do,
Yes.
I, I I mean, it's apparent that there's an altruistic element of it, that you want to see the culture evolve in a more healthy way that's more, you know, uh, more beneficial for more people, more people have access to resources and positions of power and authority and all that
Mhm.
stuff. But it sounds like it's also a personal
Oh, it's a deeply personal
thing
journey.
for you.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. My
Yeah.
work has been a deep personal initiation.
Yeah.
It continues to be, but like the last few years have been a deep personal initiation. And this is me like stepping into and claiming my own power and my own legitimacy in this context. It's it's that first and foremost. 100%.
Do you think that that's sort of the ideal balance for work? That we should be doing work that is that kind of work for us?
I hate the
Because
word should with
in
a
quote
passion.
unquote capitalism, we have day jobs, and it's, you were talking about we were just talking about the resentment that can explode in relationships.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
kind of the same thing
Yeah.
with day
It
jobs,
is.
right?
It
Yeah.
is. I mean, I feel incredibly lucky because this is a deep calling for me. I love this so much. I enjoy it so much. It is so enriching for me. It is so enriching for everybody that I meet and connect with. It changes my own life. It's transformed my own relationships with men. I experience a level of safety with men that was not accessible for me before, because of this work, because I get to experience men in a completely different way, and I get to hold space for them in a completely different way. And I'd want more women to be able to experience that for themselves, because it would solve a lot of problems for everybody. Let's be honest.
Oh, absolutely. When you say that you have more experiences with men that are, open and rich and all these things, is it clients or is it just all men in
I
your
just mean
daily life? Just
like all
it's
men
just
in my life. I just
yeah.
literally mean people don't bother me in the same way
Yeah.
that they might have done before. I don't find myself getting upset by things. I see the humanity. I'm able to play in new ways. I find myself like experiencing myself in the world and the world with new eyes. It's joyful, it's expansive. I've been loving Twitter recently because it's allowed me to really share how I approach my work with a much broader audience and just give them a
Your
taste of what it's
threads are
like
so
to interact
beautiful,
with me.
yeah, and you
Yeah,
ask these
like it's
questions and yeah, it's so
questions, but also
wonderful.
I take the time to really respond
You
and
really
drop
do.
in and like in a deep way. Like, let's
And you
actually
ask
get
for
to what's real.
clarification sometimes when people
Yeah,
give you something vague, you
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
And the crucial thing that one thing that I wish more women knew is how hungry men are to feel safe with you. And what a relief it gives them to be able to drop their guard and just be able to be. That in and of itself is and can be transformative. And the amazing thing about that for me personally has been learning that I can create that with somebody, I can facilitate that for somebody without me needing to do anything. I am not, in fact, the less that I try, the less that I make a big fanfare, the better it is. And that for me has been incredible and truly life giving because my personal background, professionally and personally, just as a life path, was feeling like there was something wrong with me and drastically overcompensating in deep ways to try and make up for a perceived deficit, and always being terrified of being found out despite seeming to be successful and never feeling good enough. And so for me, it's amazing to like remember and claim my gifts, the gifts that were not often accepted or understood by the outside world, but actually have a place, have a purpose, and are tremendously impactful. And impactful in a very effortless way. Like my work energizes me. That's how I know it's the right thing for me, because I wake up and I fucking love it. And it brings me so much joy and it's easy. And I hop on calls and it's like, I'm not coaching, I'm just being. And we get to be. And it's like, fuck, yeah. And that's just, I want to like rip up any fucking rule book about executive coaching and transformation and what that has to be like and all the boxes we push ourselves into and all the ways that I personally was taught to play small and taught that I was not good enough and that I wasn't okay. And even over the last few years, with the journey that I've been on to get to this point, to be as public as I am about this stuff, to actually like become an entrepreneur in this space, which for many is pretty taboo and controversial, and people don't know how to talk about it. And my parents have no idea how to talk about it. And it's like, it's it teaches me so much every single day. It takes me home every single day. Like, there's nothing I would rather be doing, and it's incredible to be able to connect from such a pure place. Like, that's what it feels like for me, and to be able to show people and show men that that is actually possible, and then to also like be fucking valued for my time and expertise and like be respected for it. Like, yes, fuck yes. That's really important. We need that to reset the balance. It's critical. Because if you won't pay women to support you in this regard, how are you supporting your wife? How are you supporting your employees? How do you treat everybody else? Like, it's symptomatic of so much else. And yeah, I'm only just getting started. No one has seen anything yet, is how I feel.
Well, I'd certainly have to confirm that your energy is absolutely apparent and evident, and you most certainly have your finger on the pulse of some kind of deep psychological reality. I've listeners aren't going to know that I welled up in tears when you were talking about, men having the opportunity to feel safe and not feel ashamed just for being themselves, and just the old cliche is you're doing God's work, Rachel Clifton. You're doing God's work, and bless you. Thank you so much for talking to Curiosophy Now.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be messy with you here as well.
That's perfect.
Like
Yeah.
I want to be able to fumble. That's my edge, personally. My edge is stuttering or not saying things in the right way or blah, 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 blah. That's scary for me. But I also want to allow that of myself, just as I would want to allow that of anybody else, because I'm not different from you. I'm not like special in like a pedestal-y kind of way. I want to be appreciated for all I am in my multidimensionality. And I want you to be the same, or be able to be the same, or be able to conceive of the possibility of being able to be the same. I mean, pick your poison.
Bless you. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.